HOA reported me for fishing my own ranch lake. Minutes later, I controlled their marina. Redwood Ridge was the kind of place where space meant status. Wide ranch properties bordered a glittering stretch of water locals casually called Ridge Lake. Over time, a gated development had risen along one side of the shoreline, Ridge Harbor Estates, complete with manicured lawns, uniform fencing, and a polished HOA determined to maintain its image. What most of the residents believed, however, was wrong. They believed Ridge Lake belonged to the community. It did not. The lake, along with the surrounding ranchland and mineral rights beneath it, had belonged to the Whitaker family for 3 generations. When Daniel Whitaker inherited the property at 62, he inherited not just land but documentation. Deeds older than most of the homes in Ridge Harbor. Survey maps drawn long before the HOA existed. Water rights filed with the county decades prior. Daniel wasn't confrontational. A retired agricultural engineer, he valued solitude, predictable routines, and early mornings casting a line from the wooden dock his father built in 1978. Fishing wasn't recreation. It was ritual. On a cool September morning, Daniel eased a small aluminum boat into the water just after sunrise. The mist hovered low, birds skimmed the surface, and silence wrapped the lake in peace. At 6:42 a.m., that silence shattered. A patrol vehicle from County Code Enforcement rolled slowly along the HOA Marina parking lot. An officer stepped out, scanning the water through binoculars. Daniel noticed the vehicle but continued fishing. At 6:49 a.m., his phone buzzed. A known number. He answered. "Mr. Whitaker?" the voice asked. "Yes. This is County Code Compliance. We received a complaint regarding unauthorized fishing activity in a restricted residential lake." Daniel blinked once. "Restricted?" he repeated calmly. "Yes, sir. The report indicates you are using community waters without HOA permit." Daniel looked across the water at the polished docks of Ridge Harbor Estates, their expensive slips, their carefully labeled boats. Then he looked down at the worn wood beneath his feet. "This lake," Daniel said evenly, "is deeded ranch property." A pause. "I'm going to need to verify that, sir." "You're welcome to." Within minutes, Daniel guided his boat toward shore. The code enforcement officer met him near the boundary fence separating ranch from subdivision. The officer remained professional. "Mr. Whitaker, the HOA president filed the complaint personally. Claims you've been repeatedly warned." Daniel almost smiled. "I've received letters," he admitted. "Incorrect ones." The officer requested documentation. Daniel walked calmly into his ranch house and returned with a thick binder. Inside, recorded deeds, water rights certificates, survey overlays, and a particularly critical document, the original Marina easement agreement signed when Ridge Harbor Estates was approved. The officer read carefully, then looked up. "This says the HOA Marina exists by revocable easement." Daniel nodded. "Conditional upon mutual compliance and acknowledgement of ownership." The officer's expression shifted subtly. "And has that acknowledgement been made?" Daniel's answer was precise. "No." The complaint that was supposed to intimidate him had instead triggered a formal verification process. By 6:58 a.m., the officer placed a second call. 9 minutes after the HOA filed its report, a county attorney's office flagged the Marina's easement file for review. Ridge Harbor Estates had built its polished docks and boat slips under an agreement requiring annual written recognition of Whitaker ownership and water rights. The last acknowledgement on file was 17 years old, before Daniel inherited the ranch, before the current HOA president, Melissa Grant, took office. At 7:03 a.m., Daniel received a follow-up call. "Mr. Whitaker," the officer said carefully, "we're going to need to review the HOA's compliance status. Until that's resolved, their marina privileges may be suspended." Daniel thanked him. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply returned to his dock and resumed fishing. Across the lake, residents of Ridge Harbor Estates began receiving unexpected emails from their HOA board. Temporary marina access suspension pending review. Confusion turned to frustration quickly. Boats sat idle. Boat owners demanded answers. Melissa Grant assured them it was a minor clerical issue. It wasn't. The county's review moved faster than anyone anticipated. Easement conditions required annual documentation acknowledging the Whitaker family's retained authority over water usage, shoreline alterations, and marina capacity limits. None had been submitted in nearly 2 decades. Worse still, the HOA had expanded dock capacity twice without approval. Daniel hadn't enforced it before. He hadn't needed to, until someone tried to report him for fishing in his own lake. By late afternoon, a formal notice was issued. Ridge Harbor Estates' marina operations were officially suspended pending renegotiation of easement terms. Daniel Whitaker, by default and by law, now controlled access permissions. 9 minutes. That was all it took for a routine complaint to transform into a leverage shift the HOA never anticipated. Melissa Grant requested an emergency meeting. Residents filled the clubhouse. Voices rose. How could this happen? Who authorized expansions? Why didn't we know the lake wasn't ours? Melissa attempted damage control, but documentation is merciless, and Daniel Whitaker possessed all of it. The emergency HOA meeting lasted 3 hours. Accusations circled like storm clouds. Some residents blamed Melissa. Others blamed previous boards. A few blamed Daniel, though quietly, now aware of how fragile their marina access truly was. Melissa Grant drove to the ranch house the next morning. Daniel met her on the porch. She opened with a strained smile. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Daniel remained calm. There was a complaint. Melissa shifted. Standard enforcement procedure. You reported me for fishing. You were inside community boundaries. Daniel handed her a laminated survey map. I was not. Silence stretched. Melissa tried a new angle. The marina serves 112 households. Families depend on it. Daniel nodded once. It exists by easement. We can fix paperwork. Daniel's voice stayed measured. Paperwork requires acknowledgement. And you want? He didn't hesitate. Formal recognition of ownership. Retroactive compliance fees. Environmental impact correction for unauthorized dock expansion. And a revised agreement reflecting updated liability coverage. Melissa's expression tightened. That's unreasonable. Daniel's reply was simple. Reporting me wasn't necessary. Negotiations followed over several weeks. County oversight ensured precision. Attorneys reviewed language carefully. Ultimately, Ridge Harbor Estates signed a revised easement agreement that did 3 critical things. 1. Publicly acknowledged the Whitaker Ranch's full ownership of Ridge Lake. 2. Granted Daniel oversight authority on future shoreline modifications. 3. Transferred operational management of the marina under a cooperative structure, placing Daniel as controlling partner. He did not seize the marina. He legally structured control through enforceable compliance. Residents regained access under new terms. Melissa Grant resigned quietly soon after. The tone of Ridge Harbor Estates shifted noticeably. HOA meetings became less theatrical, more procedural. Legal review processes strengthened. Assumptions were replaced by verification. Daniel returned to his quiet mornings. Fishing line cast across still water. The marina remained active but respectful. Because one lesson now anchored the entire shoreline. Ownership is not implied. It is documented. And when documentation is ignored, reality has a way of resurfacing, sometimes in as little as 9 minutes.